Hello again, I am Blunty, and as I talk, we're now just 2 weeks from Wild Hearts launching. Well, kind of 2 weeks. It gets a little fluffy, and I'll tell you what that's about in a minute. Because today I want to bounce over a nice big pile of facts and reveals and confirmations that we just got from the devs of Wild Hearts when they did a Q&A session with potential players. Oh, and if you have any questions about the game itself that aren't in this video, or if there's something specific you'd like to see tested out, or try it out, or experimented with and the like, do feel free to slam a comment down, because it seems I'm on track to actually get some hands-on with the game before launch, which is pretty exciting. So anyway, it's probably safe to assume most people watching this video will have at least some idea of what Wild Hearts is, but just for the sake of a halfway sensible narrative structure, here, quickly, let's do it. It's a new take on the Monster Hunter subgenre of action RPG game, with Monster Hunter itself being the most prominent example and the common comparative touchstone, which is coming up now on its 20th anniversary next year. The basic premise of the game is you fight big monsters to get the parts from the big monsters to make armor and weapons to fight different big monsters and continue until you've had your fun, basically. And I'm interested in asking you folks about this as potential players for Wild Hearts. Have you played this type of game before? If so, where did you jump on? I'm assuming most of you will probably say Monster Hunter World or Monster Hunter Rise, as both those games pulled a huge amount of new players into that series and this type of game in general. But it's also possible you're a Tougadin player, and Wild Hearts is by the same studio that made those games. Maybe you're even a Dauntless player. Perhaps even you're some sort of Soulsborne type player who has seen the combat in this and goes, yeah, that looks a bit familiar. I'll give that a go. Just to be clear on that, this isn't really proper full-on Soulsborne type gameplay. It's a little more forgiving and, what's the other word I'm looking for? Fun! It's a lot more fun than Soulsborne games are. Now that I've provoked multiple fan bases, and basic structural duty for the video done, and even one of those nice little YouTube algorithm-friendly calls to action where I ask you to comment. You can also now sub and bell on thumb if you like, but yeah, let's dig in properly, shall we? So, about that kind of 2 weeks from launch I was going on about. Well, technically speaking, launch is the 16th of February, but while the game is developed by Koei Temco and Omega Force, it's actually being published under the EA Originals banner, which means it's got that oddball EA style of launch crap going on to confuse people and, frankly, frustrate them, if we're being honest here. There's no demo, but there will be a game trial where anyone subscribed to either EA Play or Xbox Game Pass Ultimate will be able to play a 10-hour trial starting on the 13th of February. And should you then go on to purchase the game, your progress will, of course, carry over. I'm really not a fan of this lopsided game preview launch early access for payola crap that EA likes to do so often. But at least this time, it's a PvE game, so on the multiplayer side of things, the advantage that the privileged players who get an early jumpstart, it isn't an unfair advantage against other players. So as much as this style of launch annoys the crap out of me, at least with this game it's not, it's not entirely kind of, detrimental to the regular launch day players. But this kind of system that relies on FOMO, fear of missing out, oh, it's just sleazy. It is just sleazy, isn't it? Now, let's talk about some of the vital stuff the potential new player base has been asking about for quite some time now, and we finally have answers for. Let's start with performance, shall we? Well, the game is only launching on current-gen consoles, so we hoped for it to be well optimized and, 4K, 60, all that kind of stuff. But I got a bit of a surprise when it was revealed that on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, if you want 60 FPS, and in games like this, yeah, you want that, you're going to have to jam your console version into performance mode, which restricts the game to 1080p. In order to get that smooth 60 FPS. That's both surprising and disappointing. But it's not a deal killer. Console players are used to making compromises like this. That's why they're console players in the first place. It's a compromise. Price, performance, power, convenience. It's all a balancing act with consoles. And this is far from the only game out there, even right now, even launched quite recently, Forspoken, that has a surprisingly low resolution to achieve, playable performance on a console. Both consoles will also have a quality mode for crispy 4K visuals, but that of course will snap you down to 30 FPS. And considering you need 1080p for 60, my guess would be that 4K is not going to be a native 4K, but an upscaled 4K. Another big question we all had about this game was how many monsters, or as they're called in Wild Hearts, kimono, which, by the way, kimono is just the Japanese word that means beast, or, monster, I guess, with both bakemono being yokai-style folklore monsters, and kimono mimi meaning human-like creatures with animal traits like ears and tails and whatnot. If you are a Japanese speaker, I should probably apologize for how I pronounce those two words. I'm sure I got them wrong. But the answer to the actual question is we'll be getting 20 kimono at launch, with more to come after launch. For perspective on that number, the original Monster Hunter game, Monster Hunter 1 if you like, the game that birthed this genre, has 17 large monsters in it. Monster Hunter World, which made the series a bona fide phenomenon outside of Japan for the first time, launched with 31 large monsters, and Monster Hunter Rise had 34 large monsters at launch. And of course, both World and Rise received a lot more monsters after launch. I think Rise is up to 66 monsters or something by now. Maybe 70 by the time we get the title update. Anyway, whatever. Point is, this game has more large monsters than Monster Hunter itself had when it first began, but noticeably fewer than the new Monster Hunter games tend to launch with nearly 2 decades later. I feel like 20 kimono is a pretty decent number to launch with. It would be relatively easy just to jam in more monsters with different skins over the same skeletons, but not too much to make the fight itself feel very different. Capcom themselves have done that with Monster Hunter. There are several monsters that share quite a lot in their movesets. But if it's 20 carefully designed kimono fights that each feel unique in their own ways, yeah, I'm happy to take a lower monster count overall. Quality over quantity. In addition to that, each of these 20 kimono will have at least 2 more variations on top. Midway through the game, you'll start facing Mighty Kimono, which in Monster Hunter terms seems to be the high-rank version basically. And then in the end game, you'll face yet more dangerous versions called the Volatile Kimono. They haven't really expanded much on exactly what any of this means yet. Will they just be stat boosted for extra damage and higher XP like Monster Hunter World's Tempered monsters, or will it include new mechanics, new movesets like Sunbreak's Afflicted and Arisen monsters? Either way, it seems like there's a nice solid endgame plan, and that's encouraging. And while there's no capturing system like in Monster Hunter, which is apparently because that would clash with the story basis of the game, like the point is to kill these monsters apparently, and capturing them doesn't do us any good in the, structure of the game, you will be able to capture the smaller animals. Keep them as pets even, in special Karakuri enclosures, and doing so gives you some kind of special rewards. What that means, we still don't know exactly, but my guess would be some kind of basic material farm for consumables or craftables and the like. In more encouraging news, they're now on record as saying there are no microtransaction stuff in the game at launch, although they did use the weasel wording so many devs like to use these days and claim there is no plans to feature any in the future, which is a bit meaningless as plans can change. Plans are nothing more than ideas. So that's to be taken with a grain of salt. But they did flat out say, and I'm going to use an exact quote on this one, all post-launch contents will be free, including new kimono and more. And that's a much more encouraging phrasing, isn't it? Both from the point of view of DLC and microtransaction worries, and the fact that we now know there is an ongoing content plan to add new content, new kimono to fight, and add new challenges to the game over time. How much of that stuff there is, we still have no idea, of course. Is it just, a few weeks worth of extra content, or is it, 6 weeks, a year worth of content? Are they going to do something similar to what Monster Hunter does with sort of weekly event quest stuff that come with fresh challenges or fresh rewards? Now, when it comes to the multiplayer stuff, we had a few things nicely cleared up at last. Much like the excellent dynamic difficulty system in Monster Hunter Rise, Wild Hearts will also dynamically scale its difficulty depending on how many hunters are present, and it will scale up and back down again as people drop in or leave. There is, as we already knew, full cross-play between Xbox, PlayStation, and PC platforms, but we have now learned that there's not actually any cross-progression or cross-save stuff. So your save file and character progression only lives on one platform. Not a huge issue for most players, I imagine, but still a pretty big annoyance for some. I, for one, platform float many of my games where it's possible, including now, Monster Hunter Rise, because the Game Pass version works on PC and Xbox and is seamlessly cross-save. Another thing that I'm sure will slightly annoy some people, there is no built-in guild-like system to build a group of known players to regularly play with, but there is a so-called tag system. You can set a multiplayer session tag and share this with your wider group of friends, like in what many games might be called a lobby ID, I suppose. We don't actually know whether this is some sort of custom tag you can always use. Like, can I just set my game to just be Blunty Hunts and, leave it at that, so anytime anyone wants to drop in or drop out of one of my games, they look for that tag? Or is it a automatically assigned tag that changes every time you log in or something? We don't know that yet. But we do know the people you share this tag with will be able to find each other more easily online, and it seems this also doesn't necessarily exclude being able to also simultaneously matchmake with randos if there's room in the hunt. So it seems like it's a system that should work well. Should work well and does work well are very different concepts when it comes to gaming, so we'll wait and see on that, but seems promising. We already know that several of the Karakuri contraptions that we can build in our worlds, like the mobility stuff and map travel based ones like the zip lines, are semi-permanent. They remain in place in your game unless you destroy them, or I suppose a monster destroys them. And we already know multiplayer visitors to your game could interact with the ones that you've built and build their own. But now we know that such visitors cannot grief other players by destroying them. So you can't sort of pop into someone's world, bust up all the zip lines and peace out, just to be a jackass. Only the host has the power to destroy these things in their own world. So that's nice to know. PvE games like this tend to have a pretty decent community, but you get jerks in any game. Now, when it comes to weapons and armor, we didn't learn anything new about weapons, really, but we did have it confirmed that we can mix and match our armor pieces. We're not just stuck in full matched sets. Many of us were assuming that would be the case because that's just the sensible way to do these things, but now we know for sure. And that's promising because, again, in Monster Hunter, mixed set armor builds are a huge part of the meta and the community sort of sharing back and forth different builds and sort of chatting about what's more effective for this or this or this or this. So stuff like that helps in community building and in keeping the community strong and engaged with one another. And the armor designs are not divided by sex. There's no such thing as male or female armor sets. It's all unisex, which, hooray. Friggin' hooray. No debate or tedious crap about impractically skimpy, overly sexy female armor versus idiot thick-chad male armor. Just armor. That's designed to look like armor. It's designed to function like armor. We've also now learned that in combat there are indeed status effects, buffs and debuffs like poison and slows and fire and ice and all that kind of stuff, and these can affect both hunters and the kimono. I feel like this was a safe assumption in a game like this, It would be weird for it not to have that stuff, but this is actually the first time I think we've seen it officially confirmed. At least outside of that one little kimono gadget that we've seen that can sort of set your weapon on fire briefly. One has to imagine there are other kimono gadgets that do similar things for other status and elemental effects. And of course, this brings with it a system in the armor and the weapons to apply such effects and build sets resistant to them. The devs were asked about building for certain roles. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but in this kind of Q&A stuff, it's always the people who play healers who keep asking this question. Hey, I like playing healer. Can I play as a healer? It's never the tanks that ask this question. It's never the DPS people who ask this question. It's always the healers. In any case, yes, you can spec into playing specific roles. Your weapon choice and your actions with the Karakuri gadgets will define your role in a hunt, essentially. The example that was used was the bladed wasaga, which is the parasol shield sword weapon thingy we've seen in gameplay clips, the umbrella weapon. That is intended to be played with a tank and spank mentality, heavily reliant on parries. And healing and buffs and such are built into the Karakuri and food systems. So if you want to support your team with heals, you can absolutely task yourself with conjuring healing and defense buffs and even bubble shield Karakuri devices apparently. I like a good bubble shield, don't you? And while you're doing that, the other hunters can use their resources to focus on damage output. So yeah, you can absolutely play as a healer or a tank or a DPS or a generalist, whatever you like. And the final big thing we learned, there will be no support for Steam Deck at launch, which will disappoint, I'm sure. Monster Hunter Rise has consistently been among the most played games on the Steam Deck in Valve's monthly reports. Also worth noting that Monster Hunter Rise did not work correctly with the Steam Deck when it first launched. The Wild Hearts devs are, of course, aware this will be something people will want, something people are going to complain about, probably loudly online. And in fact, the person answering the questions is a Steam Deck owner themselves, and they share the hope that it will be made compatible with the Steam Deck in the not too distant future. As for the reason it's not compatible, well, they didn't really say, but it's pretty obvious to me. It's the friggin' EA app that has to sit underneath the game because EA are publishing it. There's a whole slew of EA games that are just flat out broken on Steam Deck. And late last year, the Steam Deck status of more than 20 EA titles was revoked by Valve. And you can bet that the EA app that every last one of them required to function is the friggin' problem. Middleware like that is always the damn problem. It's infuriating we're still having to put up with this crap in this day and age. So, if you're looking to lay some blame as to why this game doesn't work on Steam Deck, blame the publisher, EA, not the devs on this one, folks, because I bet you, I promise you, the devs would really, really, really like their game to work on the Steam Deck. It's their publisher's insistence that they use the EA app running underneath their game at all times. That's where the blame lies. Some of the useful details we learned just before we go here: there will be a system for modifying your hunter's base appearance after creation, so you're not stuck with the look of the hunter you first create when you start the game. There is a transmog system for your armor and weapons. You can play solo and completely offline, which is pretty welcome news in this day and age of single-player solo games requiring always online crap. Another modern infuriation. Oh, and you can pause in solo play, which seems like a dumb thing to say, but it's not a guarantee. But that's basically all the notable stuff we just learned, or at least had confirmed or expanded upon. Again, let me know what other questions you might have about this game, as I'll be getting some hands-on real soon. And of course, I'm planning on more content, and I will be streaming the game over on Twitch as well, so do pop a follow thing over there. Meanwhile, thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned some interesting stuff and are getting a little excited about this game. Again, I keep saying this, I really hope it's as good as it looks, because it looks like it's really good. If it plays as well as it looks like it plays, it's going to be a hell of a fun game. So thanks for watching. I am Blunty. I'll catch you next time, and thank you as always to the patrons who have been scrolling up above there.